Good morning and welcome to On the Record with Buddy Cianci. This morning, my guest is a guy who you probably got to know over the past, 6 or 8 months, because he is head of the Rhode Island Truckers Association. And one of the big problems, or one of the big debates we have going on now in the state of Rhode Island, is whether or not we're going to toll truckers, the 18-wheel trucks that we see traversing the roads and highways of the state of Rhode Island. Should we toll? Should we not toll? What's the effect going to be on consumers if the truckers have to pay tolls? Will truckers avoid the tolls and if they are implemented and go around Rhode Island and into Massachusetts another way? All those questions are going to be answered. And the question is, the governor wants to spend $1.1 billion to get $500 million of roads. All those questions are going to be answered. And, it was supposed to come up last legislative season. It didn't. It passed the Senate, but not the House. And here we are back again after all kinds of studies. And my guest is Chris Maxwell, the head of the Rhode Island Truckers Association. Thanks so much for being here, Chris, and welcome to the On the Record with Buddy Cianci.
My pleasure. Good morning.
Thank you. You've had kind of a baptism. You've been head of the Truckers Association for, what, 4 years now?
Little baptism.
Little
yes,
baptism of fire.
Yes.
When did you first learn that the governor was talking about tolling trucks?
I learned through a source, friend of mine that told me a couple of weeks beforehand that this was a possibility, that truck tolls were on the table, and we did a little research. Our firm, the May 4th Group, did some digging, and even after some digging, it was kept fairly close to the vest, and we were actually told about 2 o'clock the day before it was rolled out. That's correct.
And I remember seeing that press conference, the governor with the Senate Majority Leader and the Senate President and the Speaker of the House and all the labor people in the audience under the 610 connector.
That's correct.
Saying we're going to toll just 18-wheelers and we're going to solve this problem.
Correct.
Fixing all the bridges, and everybody was kumbaya, clapping hands. But then when I got back to my office and I started talking to some truckers and some other people, it wasn't just 18-wheelers, was it?
Well, it was all classes, and they soon realized that they didn't know they didn't know their truck classes, they didn't know their truck weights, they didn't know their truck axle spacing, they knew nothing about trucks. So they quickly did an about face, as you recall.
Yeah, I remember.
The 100 million went down to 60 million. They carved out class 6 and 7 vehicles.
Which are, tell people what class 6
class 6 and 7 are basically your straight, smaller trucks, 20, they're doing it by axle.
Who would deliver to me in a class 6 truck, a 7 truck?
A dump truck.
A UPS truck?
No, not a UPS truck. Those are under the weight. But a septic truck, a 10-wheel, a bear truck.
McLaughlin and Moran,
exactly.
really good
So,
get your Budweiser.
So they were caught in that they realized that they did it about face because they didn't want to affect the Rhode Island businesses. Essentially, what they did by pulling out the class 6 and 7s was in fact go against their own plan, because most of those trucks that they pulled out.
That was a big revenue.
They're the heaviest ones.
Yeah, the heavy. Oh, they are the heaviest ones.
So your class 8 and above are typically your tractor trailers that they're targeting that go over the road, and those guys aren't the heaviest guys. The heaviest trucks are the shorter wheelbase 3 axles that are operating internally, usually interstate, on an overweight permit.
And even though the governor said it was supposed to be 18-wheelers, it was not all just 18-wheelers in her first initial press conference.
In her first press conference.
And then they backtracked that and said, okay, it's just going to be 18-wheelers. But wouldn't that affect the tolling? I mean, if you're going to eliminate 2 or 3 classes of trucks.
Well, if you roll out a plan that's balanced on specific classes across the board, and all of a sudden you start pulling out classes, I would assume it's going to put a dent in your revenue, and that hence was the rollback in the ask from, I think it was 100 million back to 600 million. So we've had revision after revision after revision. It was clearly rolled out prematurely without any sort of vetting.
And did they consult you at all before?
No, they
See,
did
I
not.
like history. They
did not.
They ask, bring the truckers in and say, this is what we're planning to do. Do you have any suggestions or anything like that?
No, they did, and we expressed our dismay with that early, but we're by that at this point. They're still not calling upon us. They're kind of circumventing us through most recently with the Providence Chamber appealing around us to our members to get them to go into the governor's office and hear all about roadworks. But they've not yet ever reached out to us. And I venture to say that had they reached out to us at some point in time, preferably before, we actually approached the governor's office way back in February when she started discussing tolls. As a vested industry that knows a lot about tolls, the trucking industry, we offered early on in February to be a resource to the governor,
Right.
to bring some experts in from Washington. These battles are going on all around the country, tolling battles, not truck-only toll battles, but tolling battles. And across the board, states are not adopting tolls. They're going different directions. And we're an outlier in this respect, Mayor.
All right, now let me ask you this. There is no question in your mind and on your organization's mind that we need to fix the bridges.
No doubt.
I mean, you agree with that. Okay?
Absolutely, we agree.
Now,
with
you
that.
proposed, you know, in the waning days of the legislature, the Senate, because of all the machinations of she didn't know what trucks they were tolling and didn't know what the revenues were going to be, the Senate passed a tolling, or can I say a mechanism to toll
They
the
passed
bridges.
roadworks.
They passed roadworks, basically. And it didn't pass the House. Mattiello said, I don't know enough about it. He was concerned.
Yeah.
And he was the, as some people say, he was the only adult in the room at the time because he put the brakes on it.
I'd support that.
Okay. And it became known that we were going to spend $1.1 billion to buy $500 million of roads because the debt service was something like $500 or $600 million, and you had to spend $40 or $50 million on gantries and then all the other fees that go along with bonding. And then we don't have a history of collecting tolls either.
Correct.
And so if you go to a revenue bond, which would generate from your guys, the truckers,
Sure.
the revenue that would come into the state of Rhode Island, that revenue bond, if you went out, it would cost almost double the interest rate on a revenue bond than it would be for a general obligation bond.
That's correct.
You know, and that's just beyond me. But anyway, it did not pass the House, it passed the Senate. But what is troubling a lot of people in your industry and the citizenry is that no one really knows. The governor wants to pass something that would, first of all, but put forth the bond, give authority to go to bond for this $500 or $600 million, which would cost us $1.1 billion. And then there'll be another piece of legislation that would decide how much the tolls would be, where they would be placed, because no one knows what those facts are, because they don't know themselves. And the Federal Highway Administration has kind of weighed in, but not really. So where do we stand now? What's the latest communication you've had with the governor's office or with anybody, Peter Albini?
Well, let me say unequivocally, we've had no conversations from day one with the governor's office. We've been called in. We were called in a couple of meetings along the way, but we've had no substantive dialogue with them about roadworks or any remedies whatsoever. So the latest that's come out 6 months later is we're no closer to any transparency than we were day one. We've had revision after revision, the pulling out of the classes, the offering up of tax credits back in May or June, and now we're now here in November, and now we learn that their end game is to get the bonding and the program passed, and then let's debate in an open forum where to put the gantries and the amount. So that's unacceptable at this point. It's almost sad, and it's both sad and comical that we are at this point, and they have now espoused their desire not to disclose that. That's unacceptable to our
You don't know where the
businesses.
tolls are going to be. You don't know really what trucks are going to be tolled.
We don't,
really.
well, we don't know where they're going to be, and so then you
and
really
what
can't.
the tolls, how much the tolls are going
You
to be.
can't really assess the impact. And we've had really some of our core members, some of our very great retailers and businesses. They've called up asking, how do we assess the impact? They really can't. And this is going to affect the
consumer.
local guys. Well, it's going to affect the consumer
too.
It's going to affect the local trucking companies too. It's also going to affect, we've talked about the through guys.
Yeah.
And we can get in, and I'll get into that maybe later, the diversion factor around the state.
That's the other thing. How many people really would, if there were a $50, $40, $30 toll, whatever it might be, trucks coming from, from the New York, Connecticut area that have to get into up to Connecticut, or Connecticut up to, through New York, or to get to New York from Rhode Island or from Boston. They don't have to go through Rhode Island, do they? It's only a 40 or 50
two
mile.
diversions we'll talk about. One is around Rhode Island. So it's just a matter of, once the gantries go up, the trucking industry
diverts.
just as quickly as water finds the path of least resistance, as do trucks.
Okay.
Trucks will reset the dial. They'll reset the company policy. They will go up 395 to Route 90, bypass Rhode Island altogether. Less mileage, less tolls. And if they don't do it out of economic necessity or policy, they'll do it out of principle. The trucking company, the trucking industry on roadworks, we'd like to have a say in the dialogue before this catastrophic.
But you can predict what's going to happen.
We can predict that the trucking industry is going to have the last say on this.
All right.
And that's the most dangerous fact, because as I said earlier, Mayor, we're dealing with a regime here that doesn't know trucks, truck weights, truck classes. They know nothing about IFTA and IRP, the funding mechanisms that they're recipients of.
Is the sticker, yeah, because they get, that IFTA is the sticker you put on the side of the truck.
Right.
And if you buy gas in a certain other state, if your truck is going to travel in Rhode Island, even though you buy the gas here, the state of Rhode Island gets.
You can buy all your gas here in Rhode Island, as most of our companies
and not get
do.
all the revenues.
They have it fueled on site. Yeah. They pull out of Rhode Island and they pay the states
that they go through
a clearinghouse.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's
so
amazing
we're going to get
technology.
so every truck that comes through Rhode Island, every truck 46 miles Connecticut to Massachusetts, pays Rhode Island, and it's a great revenue source. We collect millions and millions of dollars. So not only when the diversion occurs, and it will, trust me, they don't know truck.
Yeah, they'll lose revenue
behavior.
from the IFTA tax.
No, they're going to not meet the tolling revenue projections. They're going to take a big bite out of money in hand, which is the IFTA tax.
All right. Now, there was also some studies done as to how many trucks pass through Rhode Island. Yeah. And I noticed on my radio talk show, WPRO, I read a couple of studies. They seem to be inconsistent and all over the lot. One study they do says there's going to be 4,600 trucks on one road, and then it's 11,000 the next week. How is that possible to have such discrepancies?
My guess is that they felt that when roadworks was rolled out in the spring, they thought it was going to pass right through. Then the scrutiny and the heat was raised up. And I think they had to roll some numbers in very quickly to prop up the projections. So somehow somebody plugged in 11,000 trucks a day going over I-195.
How many trucks a day would they have to be guaranteed coming through the state of Rhode Island in order to meet the revenue that they need to pay off $1.1 billion?
You know, I don't know specifically, but I do know that the truck counts are off. And if the truck counts are off,
then their calculations
correct. So for instance, their original 11,000, which no point in time, Mayor, have there ever been a truck 11,000 trucks through in history. Their 11,000.
That's what they say. 11,000.
Their 11,000 count is now down to about 4,000, and it's matching basically 95 and 195.
And that doesn't count the diversions. Am I right, Chris?
No, the diversion's another factor. That's going to cut into what they've got for toll. So the original was 11,000 trucks per day. We estimated through our own truckers' math locally. It was more like 3,000 or 4,000. We had a study done, a GPS study, that showed that the ratio really is 2 to 1. For every two trucks on 95, there's only one truck on 195. So the 11,000 number that was plugged in the spring, that by the way, the Senate voted on, with 11,000 trucks equated to 35 million of the 60 revenue. So do the math. If that real number was a fraction of that, even half that, you've got a chunk of 15 to 20 million pulled right out of the back. So
that they're counting on coming in, but the revenue won't be there because they've got the wrong truck count.
No. So how do you?
And that add into diversions.
I ask this very simplistically. How do you roll out $1.2 billion ask and not have your every last penny accounted for?
Right.
This was rolled out. 11,000 trucks. The truck counts are all over the place. Diversion's the other factor.
I got to hold you right there. I've got to go to a break. So you come to the conclusion that the truck counts are off, that they'll never raise that kind of money.
They will not.
And that we don't even know where the gantries are going to be. And I want to get into the REMI study, which the Speaker of the House wanted to have done. And I want to get into his role and where you stand with him. But right now, it's time for a break. We'll get back with Chris Maxwell, the head of the Rhode Island Truckers Association, to talk about tolling in the state of Rhode Island. We'll be right back. Welcome back to On the Record with Buddy Cianci. My guest this morning, Chris Maxwell, who is the head of the Rhode Island Truckers Association. We all know we have to fix the roads, Chris. Yes, we all know that the bridges are in awful shape. We all know that the governor tried to do a program that was kind of, maybe you think, ill-conceived, $1.1 billion for $500 million of roads when you consider all of the interest that has to be paid.
Correct.
She says she needs it because she wants to surge it. She wants to get a lot of stuff done right away. And then, we can, she wants to fix these bridges in 10 years, and they're unsafe, and maybe she's got a point.
She does.
What is the Truckers Association? There's no question there was a REMI study done. That's because the speaker wanted it. It's a regional economic, whatever they call it, place, module, whatever it is. But they did a study, and they came back and said that, yeah, they agreed with the governor and said it would be $520 million more in the economy because of all the money that would be spent. It would raise the gross national domestic product of the state, blah, blah, blah. But there was never a study done on what the impact on consumers were, because obviously that's going to be more costly. The truckers aren't going to assume it; they're going to pass the.
They're going to pass it along.
Yeah, that's we agree with that. But my question is, Mattiello was the only adult in the room who stopped the tolls. Sure. Now, you know, he seems to be going along with it. What is the solution as far as the Rhode Island Truckers Association goes? What plans have you offered?
We've offered it. We rolled a plan out last week.
Because you know we have to fix the bridges.
Sure we do. We rolled a plan out last week that simply, and I'll get into some of the specifics, an 18-cent diesel tax increase.
Per gallon?
Per gallon. Which the trucking industry can and will absorb.
But how do you separate if I have a Volkswagen Jetta and I pull up to a pump?
That's a consequence. If you have a Volkswagen diesel Jetta, you bought it to get more mileage. The impact to you, there's going to be an impact. But overall, this is aimed at the larger trucks. There is going to be an impact.
Well, if I own a little Volkswagen Jetta, I got to pay the increase in the diesel tax too.
Absolutely, 18 cents a gallon times what you purchase a year based on a better economy in the first place. So we're not saying there's not going to be some
beyond that.
Getting beyond
that. Truckers pay 18, or you're willing to say 18 cents more per gallon per diesel, plus an increase in the registration fees.
That's correct. Right.
By $500, I think.
Well, we looked at $500. What we wanted to do was put a formidable plan up that matched the governor's.
And how much would this generate, Chris? I think a $250 million over 5 years.
Over 4 years. You had 10.8 from the diesel tax. You had 1.6 from the registration.
Well, that's a far cry.
We gave back the 13.5.
Oh, that she wanted to give you. Okay.
To have it back, put it toward roads. You have 4 years to use that revenue stream to fix everything but the 610 connector, along with financing the.
You think that $250 million over 4 years would fit? It's $250 million total over the 4 years.
It's going to fix everything but the 610. The 610 is the biggest factor.
And that has $400 million coming from the feds to begin with, right?
That's got bike path aside. That's where the money is going to the 610. So our contention is, after we get the other bridges that are compromised throughout the state, use those revenue streams after that, after 4 years, in the 5th year, to use that revenue stream to bond 610. Now that's what this does.
You wouldn't be able to fix 610 in a hurry, which is falling down.
Perhaps not.
And that's the problem.
Okay.
Isn't it? So
that's one of the problems.
Okay.
But I think what we did, Mayor, is we put up where we said we were going to create a revenue stream in a day and age where not many industries are coming to the table. And I think we also demonstrated that with a little collaboration, of which there's been none, this is a template that other states are going toward. Michigan just put a plan together, no tolls. That's $1.5 billion. Texas is looking at the same. Delaware, a state similar in size to us. No one is looking at tolls. So what we did was we put together a plan that we feel is a good starting point, a template for.
And that would be increasing the diesel tax on trucks.
That's correct.
Increasing the registration fees. And the Gavi money, the government anticipated revenue, that $120 million would still be applicable.
That's part of the governor's plan as well.
Part of the governor's plan, that would be part of your plan. And then you would also have if she went out for a revenue bond, the interest rate would be probably 5%. We don't have any history of collecting tolls. And you bring up interesting points that there'll be diversion. The counts are wrong on the trucks. Your count is totally different from the governor's count or from the Department of Transportation's accounting or measurements. And it would cost. I mean, even if you had to go to a general obligation bond, you could fund it through. Even if you had to have some tolling, you could fund the general obligation bond where you got lower interest rates through the revenue from tolls. You could dedicate the revenue from tolls to a general obligation bond and still get a much less payout because the interest rate would be lower, couldn't you?
Yeah, the bonding mechanisms.
But you don't like the word tolls.
Well, I did want I did want to tell you. You did
Yeah.
mention a hybrid of tolls. No, we do not want any tolls whatsoever. Truck tolls are not happening.
How many truck companies? Well, there are a lot of companies that own their own trucks, but how many truckers that really in your organization? How many truckers do you represent?
We represent about 600 companies. We represent about 10,000 about 15,000 employees. Probably 10,000, trucks. So it's a significant.
That would be now. How many would be subject to this if the governor had her way? How many of these trucks would be so-called subject to the?
Within the state, about 3,000, and that's the ones we targeted for the registration increase.
Because
those are Class A. Because those are Class A.
But all those other trucks, if they're diesel, would have to pay in your plant would have to pay the increase in the diesel fuel tax.
That's correct. They are using the roads. They are heavy-duty trucks, and we're not backing away from that obligation. But the main revenue stream, Mayor, is what the governor is targeting: the trucks that are driving through and just using border-to-border Rhode Island, and that is the revenue stream at 18 cents that's going to be added here. Now, and she also the governor makes another observation that these trucks are abusing the roads. They're not abusing the roads. The interstate was designed for commerce. These trucks are well within their weights. The federal highway is designed to carry these trucks. Most of them are not even exceeding 60,000 pounds in weight, so they're not abusing the roads.
From a legal standpoint, is this even legal to toll just trucks, 18-wheelers, or?
We don't know that you can just toll trucks.
What's the federal highway?
Federal highway is taking a very obvious standoff. Let's let it happen. We don't know if
nobody else does this, do they?
Nobody else.
Just trucks, just 18-wheelers. Don't they do? There are tolls on the eastern seabord on 95, but they're all inclusive. Cars, trucks.
There's a shared burden, and that's all we.
Shared burden.
We are not espousing tolls for Volkswagen Jettas or trucks. We don't think tolling. We think tolling is a bad step for any state.
Even if they did do the tolling, Chris, isn't it a bad form to place all of the decisions under the legislation that she proposes? Remember, she says pass the bond first, and then we'll do the regulations with another law, tell them where the gantries are going to be and how much the tolls are going to be, and all that. Isn't that a lot of power to put in one man or woman who would be Director of Transportation? It would be all up to him.
I think that's
the czar.
One of the General Assembly's sticking points with this. That's unacceptable. That's going to happen. And on top of that, now that there's no transparency, or there's no transparency, there's bad data, and there's no idea now where the gantries are, the tolls. If you're, and that's why I want to get in as well. There's another type of diversion, that's intrastate diversion. You're going to now have the companies within the state who are going to take it on the chin as well with the tolls, doing diversion within the state. So what you have now are the tolls go up. You have traffic managers for your local trucking company or private carrier saying, hey, we're going to go from A to B in Rhode Island, up Atwood Avenue, up Hartford Avenue. We're going to divert around the toll. So now you have extra traffic congestion on the secondary roads. You have the secondary roads being chewed up and damaged because they weren't designed to.
And a lot of them have municipal roads that have to be maintained by the local government.
So that's the other type of diversion, and I think municipal leaders should be carefully looking at this.
And we don't know the tolls.
And they have a right. Well, I met with a
few
mayors, and I told them just beware, because if there's a toll that locks your constituents into their their businesses, and they can't get to work without paying tolls, that's going to be an expensive proposition.
Imagine a company that has a gantry that has trucks that would be subject to the toll, and the gantry is put right outside their doorway. I mean,
correct.
They got to pay every single day. But from your standpoint, what about Mattiello? Because he seems to be a supporter of yours, but now he's kind of he seems more or less going along with the tolls. Have you met with him?
We've got a long way to go in this dialogue, and hopefully the dialogue gets more constructive rather than more polarizing. That's our hope. But I think the speaker.
He was on my show 2 weeks ago, sitting in that chair, and I asked him about your proposal of $250 million over 4 years, and just didn't even let me finish the question. He said, not enough revenue, not enough revenue.
How much is enough revenue?
Well, I
And
don't
how
know.
much
You gotta
do
ask
need, how
him,
much do you
but-
need? How much do you need up front? I mean, clearly, we're spending $500 million to blitz the infrastructure. And clearly, nothing against my old friends in DOT, because you know I came from
Yeah,
that
that's
25
right.
years in it. They're my friends. I want them to do well. I want the governor to do well, but I want the state to do well. This DOT is not proven capable of handling that sort of workload. So why can't the state roll itself back to a responsible pay-as-you-go plan? And I'm not saying our plan is perfect. Our plan is a template.
Would you like a hybrid? Would you go along with, if you had to, in a compromise, a minor amount of tolling that would be a revenue stream for a general obligation bond, which would reduce the obvious interest that would bring the obligation?
No, we could never
back?
support a truck
never
only,
support a
truck only
truck toll.
toll.
Never,
And that doesn't
okay.
mean we're going to support a toll for cars either. You know.
Okay, so basically, you've got a reprieve until, because there's going to be no session.
That's correct.
The Remy
And
study
again,
is done.
the speaker, look, the speaker listened to us. He's continued to listen to us. Just because he's maybe had a change of heart, he's got a lot of information coming his way. This is a complex issue, so we're not going to be fair weather friends to the speaker. We want to be a resource. We want to be part of the solution. And just because he's wavered and he's not with us today, that doesn't mean he doesn't deserve our support in trying to vet and carry out a difficult task.
See,
for
I
the-
think
for
a
the
general
state.
obligation bond would pass in a minute in the state, because
yeah.
it would have to go to the voters. Chris Maxwell, you got your work cut out ahead of you. This has been a tough year, a lot more work than you probably signed up for.
Well, you know, I
because of
think
this.
it's a big issue, but hopefully, again,
Okay.
we'll want the state to prevail.
We'll
more than anything.
watch with great interest over the next few weeks and to see when the legislature comes back what's going to happen. Thanks so
for
much for
having
being
me,
with
Mayor.
us.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, and stay tuned for more great programming on ABC, your Channel 6, your Southeastern New England affiliate for ABC. Have a great